This episode is dedicated to the legacy of legendary drummer of Cream, Ginger Baker.
Are you those kind of people? I read this weird thing. It was actually on a Sonic Youth record. It was like people that could only get excited sexually if they were dressed up as stuffed animals. Is that you? I knew that I would never meet anyone like that until we came to New Orleans. I just knew it. Okay, I'm in room 518 over at the Hudson Arms or whatever the fuck that is. And I'll bring my teddy bear. And away we go.
You're listening to Live on Four Legs, the live Pearl Jam podcast experience, featuring
Mr. Stone Gossard. Fucking camera in the drum. Mr. Boom Gasper! You can call me Al, you can call me Ed, you just fucking call me, why don't you?
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Live on Four Legs podcast, the definitive live Pearl Jam podcast. And we're back. Well, I'm back, technically. That was a recording, what you heard last week, of me doing all of that, that clip show garbage that we decided to throw on you. Every now and again, we got to do it. We got to take a little break. And I think having a wedding was a good excuse to throw that in. So, we're back. We're back with a full episode this week. Randy Sobel here. John Farrar over there.
Hello,
John.
Welcome back, man. It's good to have you back.
Thanks. Yeah, I fully enjoyed you and Buckley taking the reins while I was out, and I think you guys made for a really good battery, and can't wait to hear what you guys got in store next time you guys team up.
Yeah, it was fun, and just to be clear, there are Braves. They're not my Braves. They're our Braves.
Well, according to your fabricated Facebook post, there are Braves, but
you willingly put on the hat, so don't come crying to me.
Well, didn't your son kind of, Lucas looked at me, he gave me that look like, you got to put the hat on. You're in my house, buddy.
Hey,
it wasn't for you.
He's a cute kid. Don't.
And your daughter too. It was 2 against 1. I couldn't go against that, but. No, there is no Braves fandom here, especially in that series, which at this point it could be an irrelevant point because by the time that this show comes out, they could be eliminated from the playoffs. They could have advanced. Who the hell knows?
We'll see. NLE's chance back to back.
Yeah. Okay. He had 14 years of all that good karma.
No, yeah, it's good to have you back. I tried to hold it down while you were gone.
You did a good job.
Did some singing a little bit.
I heard that.
It's definitely good to have you back.
Well, you know what? If I bring the singing back this week, then we'll see if I can match you shot for shot. But you need to come up with a signature to kind of combat with. We can do a little, I don't know, The Voice or American Idol, Pearl Jam style. Somehow at the end of these shows. I think that's pretty dangerous. Before we get into our guest this week, I just want to remind you all that our Patreon account is up and running as always, patreon.com/liveonfourlegs. And we have some great things that are up there right now, including Evolution episodes for the songs Leash and Alive. There should also, in the next couple weeks, I think you should be expecting another Evolution episode for State of Love and Trust coming pretty soon. So if you want to support the podcast, head on over to patreon.com/liveonfourlegs. You give anything you want into the podcast. That is up to your discretion. And for us, we give back to you. We let you come on the show. And John, what do they do if they come on the show?
They get to talk about a show that they want to talk about and come on and get to come on the show, and I will threaten to fight you.
That 100%. John is going to threaten to fight you because, well, if you come on the show and say that Mike McCready is an overrated guitarist, you have it coming for you. No offense, Tom Quay of the
or if you come into my
Metallica
house and say that Crop Duster is in your bottom 20 of songs.
Well, that's not as bad.
I will threaten to kick you out of my house, as you learned last week.
That's not as bad.
No, but our Patreon, it's. There aren't a lot of shows where you get access to literally everything for $1 a month, and that's what we're doing. You get access to all the extra episodes. We've done bonus giveaways. We're going to do more stuff in the future. I don't know if we want to tease our plan for next year, but there might be an ongoing Patreon series in 2020 that you're going to want to get in on. So now's a great time to jump on that if you've been thinking about it and you haven't yet. $1 a month gives you access to everything that we're doing over there.
Yeah, it's a future investment, especially, come January, we're going to have some really good episodes. Think, I won't spoil it yet, but think the MSG series that we did this year, and think of maybe a venue or maybe a certain type of show that is ongoing throughout the years that that we can touch up on, and there's going to be a lot of content. So keep that in mind, and those are going to be must listen shows, and they're only going to be available via Patreon. So again, head on over there, and from there, let's get into our guest for today. He's part of the Antiquiet podcast, and we kind of both found out about him. John, you searched Pearl Jam in Apple Podcast frequently just to see what's going on.
Yeah, every once in a while to see if something pops up, and his show came up, and it looked really interesting. So I gave it a listen, sent it over to you, and I thought it was fantastic. His passion for the band and the music really came through in that thing, and it really touched a nerve with me. So we reached out to him, and glad to have him with us today.
Yep. Let me introduce everybody to the show. This is Johnny Firecloud from the Antiquiet Podcast. Johnny, how's it going? I thank you for joining the show.
Yeah, thank you.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. That's quite an intro.
Man.
It's an honor. Thank you.
Well, you do good things for the Pearl Jam community. We give a little bit back. That's the kind of give and take that comes with the Live on Four Legs. And today we add you as our 2 extra, which we're happy to do. So
it's an honor. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And like John was just saying before, like we discovered your show, and your passion for the band comes full force in this. This is not like any other podcast that is out there about the band. Usually most of what we're doing is about the shows and our experience with the shows, and they're obviously the ones that focus on the songs and other subjects, but you're focusing on your personal connection to the band. So what was it like going back and going through all of this and sort of placing together these ideas on a timeline and putting these stories together?
Yeah, that's something I really had a little bit of a battle with, I think, right out of the gate, because I didn't want to do a story. I didn't want to tell a tale or record a podcast that was in league with what you guys do, which is very admirable and awesome. And you guys have a great show going on. And the last thing I wanted to do was retell or reapproach something that had been done already or covered already. And there's plenty of, great podcasts out there and great, shows that go through the various aspects of Pearl Jam. But one thing that I hadn't heard was somebody who's been a lifelong fan, or, what's called 30-year fan, going through how they fell in love with the band in the pursuit of discovering more, back in those early days when the best you could get was a rumor. There weren't websites. There was no internet at the time. You couldn't pull up your favorite show on YouTube and just, reminisce while you're at work or whatever. There was none of that technology existed, and none of that capability existed. So I knew it was a pretty big project to take on. I was foolish to think that it could have been one episode. I think we talked before we started recording here that, I got to about 2.5 hours in and realized, okay, this needs to break in half, because there's too much to tell here. And the story of my relationship with Pearl Jam and my experiences with the music growing up, and then as, going through the transitions throughout my life and how fandom kind of changes and your appreciation changes. And if you're lucky enough to sort of ride the parallels of change that the band does, that you're, following or enchanted by, or so passionate about, in this case, Pearl Jam, that's a really lucky thing. And as it's ebbed and flowed, throughout my life, I found myself falling deeper and deeper into these various stories that tied to various shows that I thought, sketching it out ahead of time, outlining the thing. I figured, I'll just skim over that with a couple words. Suddenly you're, 20 minutes into a story about that incredible tambourine experience that you had, or,
sure,
whatever momentous, Eddie going off on some crazy rant. It pulls you down into those rabbit holes. So it's a nice little, for my own sake, it's an autobiographical bit, that helps me contextualize what my fandom is now, from all those years, but also what I've come to experience and understand from the people who have listened to it is that a lot of these stories are reflections of stories that other people have, experiences that they went through that were very similar, whether it be getting their hands on, the No Fucking Messiah bootleg or hallucinogenic recipe, or, the way that they saw their first show and that kind of thing. It turned into something that grew legs of its own. And at that point I had to keep up with it, which is really exciting. And so all that makes me, kind of a little bit intimidated for the second part, knowing that people can be that into it. But
it brought back a lot of memories for me.
It's exciting,
from the mid-90s and like early 2000s of being there. And I think we have a lot of shared experiences. Let's kind of backtrack a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your website and the podcast and how it got started.
Sure, yeah. The Antiquiet Podcast is an offshoot of Antiquiet.com. It's a rock and, a music and culture site that's been around since 2007. And it was started by a guy named Squirrel, Kevin Kogel, and I. We kind of became brothers through music from around the turn of the century. It's so fucking weird to say around the turn of the century. It doesn't make you feel old. So we, he moved out here based on our friendship and our love of music, and we kind of orbited LA, and a lot of what we did at the time when we first kind of got together, and we're told the story on the podcast, involved going to shows and kind of just stomping all over radio contests that they had in Southern California or in San Diego to be able to get these free tickets to shows. And so we have a lot of memories tied into Pearl Jam. So, fast forward from 2007 till 2016, 17 or so, we started the podcast as journalism started to go kind of down the drain. And there's, it's a real labor of love to be writing music stories every day and, keeping up with album reviews and interviews and so on when ad revenue doesn't work out anymore, and there's you're going into the red to keep the lights on. So at that point, it became more of a passion project than, the day job kind of thing. And the podcast became a new medium by which to be, I don't want to say legitimate, but you could tell the stories and have a more charismatic, I guess, interaction with your audience. And that appealed to me a lot. And I like to talk. I'm a little bit verbose, I think. So, that serves the medium well. The one mandate that we had for Antiquiet across the board is that we have to believe in what we're putting up. I'm not going to promote a band that I wouldn't listen to. And you don't find a whole lot of websites like that, these days.
Right.
There's a lot
they will take whatever they can.
Yeah, a lot of glad handing, a lot of, favors for PR, which is, in itself kind of a necessary evil sometimes in the industry to get the access or the interviews. And, it's kind of the ugly side of music journalism. But being able to take a more personal approach has allowed us to kind of sidestep that.
So tell us, you have a part 2 coming up for your Pearl Jam fandom episode. What's in store? This is going to be like 2003 on sort of deal?
Yeah, it's a very good call. It's about 2003 on, and that I think I ended it around the time when I caught the tambourine, going with another big fan of your guys, actually, Deborah, who calls into the show. I know. Yeah, and so the next one is going to be basically from 2003 to, let's call it 2019 or 2020. It'll come before 2020. Yeah. I promise.
And we'll be out there. We'll be promoting and we'll be pimping it out as much as we can.
Thank you. I very much appreciate that. Yeah. So this one is going to be focused much less on the wild-eyed discovery of the band, so much as now I've hit my stride of I know how to get to the shows now, and I know how to follow the band, and I know what I'm trying to experience from it. And I think that hits maybe a fever pitch, because I think there's a point, I think, as a fan where you start to expect things from the band. Mm-hmm. And if you don't get your way, whether it be through a release or a show or, whatever the case may be, maybe it repels you a little bit. And I think there's a story to be found in that. And I had an experience when they headlined Bonnaroo in 2016 that I actually caught quite a bit of shit from the fan community about, in the fan club as well, because they didn't necessarily put on the best show, and it was a pretty boilerplate set list, and Ed was drunk right out of the gate because the show was delayed due to rain. And so it was just kind of a shit show all around. But I came from, that experience being really kind of bummed out about it to seeing them at Wrigley Field later that year. I think it was 2 months later, and being absolutely reborn in terms of, fandom, and really absolutely totally blown away and reignited in terms of my passion for the band. And so I
was at those shows too.
Yeah, it's just absolutely amazing. Like, someday we'll go all the way to like everybody crying, during this. Like, it was just the most magical shit ever. And
Engagement, there was Gleason, who we're going to talk about in a
right,
second.
Exactly. So coming out of that, so coming out of that, and then going through, certain things in my own life or what have you, it's a journey into what it means to be a grown up now, and to be appreciating the band for what they are, and to find my own way through the music in these parallel paths, like I was mentioning earlier, about how these guys have grown up. And if I would have heard a song called The End or Thumbing My Way or something like that when I was a teenager, I'm gonna get the fuck away from me. Like, this band is, I want nothing to do with this, But, you hit your 30s, your late 30s, and get that big 4-0 around, and suddenly there's some real shit that you're dealing with in life that is mirrored in these sounds. And I've come to appreciate that more and more as time has gone on. So yeah, that's what part 2 is essentially going to be about.
It's the dad ed phase of your of your fandom.
I'm really not a huge fan of the dad rock Pearl Jam phase, but there's a good spectrum to work within.
So yeah, if people wanna check it out, it's the latest episode of your podcast, Antiquiet.
Yes,
it's called Pearl Jam Fan Life Part 1, 1991 to 2003. So definitely go and check that out. Highly recommend it.
And when Part 2 comes out, we will be the first ones to come on our show and say, Part 2 is out. You got to listen to it right now. And I'd even go as far as say, drop our show. You can always come back to this. Go and listen to that one. It's way more personal, even though you're going to get into some, personal stories here in a second. We're going to talk some really good stuff about Voodoo Fest. But yeah, this is a must listen for any Pearl Jam fans, because I think it's going to tug on a lot of heartstrings for you guys. So definitely.
That's amazing, man. Thank you.
You did it. You're the one. Hey, look, you're the one. You're the one that put it together, and we stand here in awe, and half of this podcast is us going through and trying to relive people's memories, and half of it is giving back to the people that we really respect in the community and wanting to tell their stories. And that's part of why we wanted to have you on and get you to talk about this today. So we again really appreciate you doing this. So let's get into Voodoo Fest now. Look, you kind of mentioned it, Bonnaroo there. Festivals are weird, and this is the second. Maybe it's the third festival show that we've covered, and I don't want to count Pink Pop, because that's just kind of above everything. It's Pink Pop 92. It's really the beginning of everything. But we did Reading Festival 2006. We did that back in the summer. But this is not really our wheelhouse, doing festivals, because you kind of look at a festival set list and you're like, well, what's so special about that? There's Jeremy, there's Daughter, there's Better Man, there's all the normal stuff. It's all just jam-packed into one show. But this one does have an air of some really special moments to it. So what I want to know from you is, going into the show, you're expecting kind of festival, and this is around the time where I had a bad festival experience the year before this at Made in America Festival, where it was... That was my version of your Bonnaroo, where Eddie again was plastered. The crowd was, all they cared about was Jay-Z and Drake. I wasn't into it at all. I've stayed away from festivals since then, and really that's why we've stayed away from festivals on the show too. So you're going into the show, and I don't know if it was widely announced that Steve Gleason was going to be there. This was around the time where I was actually working at ESPN at the time. I was working really closely within the NFL group, and I was starting the transition to working into NFL Countdown. So this was, I want to say right before Lightning Bolt came out, maybe like a week or two before it came out, this feature with Steve Gleason came out. And I remember I was sitting in our screening area, and I overheard one of the producers is like, "Oh yeah, we got Pearl Jam coming on the show this weekend." And I roll my chair over, and I'm like, "What the fuck did you just say?" He's like, "What? It's just Pearl, like acting like it's just some '90s nostalgia band." And I'm like, "No, you don't understand. Like, this is a pretty big deal. Can you tell me more about this?" And I don't remember what was said, but I went back to a message that I posted on the forums, and I can't believe that I actually remember this. I posted before the feature ran, and I posted to people on the forums like, "Hey, look out for this." I don't know if people knew the story about Steve Gleason at the time. It was really the first time that they were talking about his ALS and his battle through it and his connection to McCready and Eddie. It was really the first time that anybody knew about this in the public eye. So my information, even being and talking to the producers, and I knew the guy that produced it, I knew the guy that edited it, they didn't tell me anything beforehand except for, it's going to make you cry, it's going to be emotional. Just wait. There's there was a 5-minute edition. There was a 10-minute edition that ran on E60 after the Countdown feature, but both were fantastic. But that's what, kind of tying into this. Did you know going into this, were you expecting festival show? Were you expecting, were you expecting something different, or were you just kind of there? New Orleans, let's have a good time. Voodoo Festival, man. 9 Inch Nails the next night,
Yeah, it's, you kind of nailed it, where festivals, I've always loved music festivals. A lot of my friends hate them. For the past 13 years, I've been going out to damn near every music festival and covering it, reviewing it as well as taking photos and so on. So I've been intimately familiar with the whole gamut of festivals, but the one that I had never hit up until 2013 was the Voodoo Festival, and had never been to New Orleans. And it was just one of those things that was like, if I'm going to do it, I want to do it right. And of course, Pearl Jam headlining is certainly a way to do it right, for fans like us. So my excitement going down there was at a fever pitch, even though I kept telling myself, okay, listen, it's going to be just a festival set, and it's only going to be, so long, and they've got to play the hits, and they've got to, cross off these boxes, because that's what you do when you're at a festival where there's fucking Macklemore and The Cure and 9 Inch Nails, but you also want to show up. And it still had that it was a little while after Halloween, not too many days after. So it's still very much
the first.
Yeah. And it had that, so yeah, about as close as Halloween as you can get. So people were still wearing costumes. There was still that like mystical kind of feeling. And especially in New Orleans. I mean, I've got only 3 or 4 trips down there under my belt now by this point. And it's, it's such an incredible town, such a magical, kind of spooky, in a fun kind of way place to be. And so, being down there wide-eyed, it's, my first trip to New Orleans at that point, and wandering around the Voodoo Fest, I was super excited to see 9 Inch Nails. I was super excited to see, Pearl Jam. And there was just an air of, I don't want to call it mystique in the air, but there was something to it that seemed kind of extra. And I didn't know anything about the Steve Gleason element at all. And I'd heard the name bandied about here and there, but until that video that you had mentioned, I had no idea whatsoever. And that really threw people hard because it was a powerful video. And, you know, at this point, you could probably speak more to that than me, but I had a photo pass because, like I said, I was there covering the festival, but I didn't want to go in the pit for 3 songs and then have to go out where, you know, the whole crowd is packed in. So you're going to have to go to the very back for the rest of it. I'm like, do I get those first 3 intimate experiences and then sacrifice the rest, or find an alternative? So I dug my way into the pit about halfway through the day, and it became a struggle for perseverance, I guess you could say. You know, it was very sweaty, and people were very elbowy, but still very, very jovial. And I credit that to the area. But I wound up becoming about, let's call it 4 rows back in the crush of people. And it was an incredible place to be because I was on Mike's side. And so for the whole show, I was able to be pretty as close to the front as you could get without having your hand on the rail. Right. But I took maybe 1,600 pictures while I was there because I was determined to get a good shot of Eddie. But I had to hide my camera from security and so on. And we can get to the best photo I've ever taken of the band later on.
Which is going to have to get to our social media accounts at some point.
Yeah. Excellent. Great. But yeah, there was a sense of real magic to the air. And as the show came closer, there was this New Year's Eve level celebration, this anticipation that, I mean, there's always that feeling before the big Pearl Jam show, you know, but something felt different. Something felt a little magical. And then this Steve Gleason thing happened. And he came out and introed the band, and, you know, came to find out that he wrote the set list and so on.
I want to mention too, we covered the show that took place before this in Charlotte, where I talked about, you know, that was my first experience being on the rail and everything that happened there. And, you know, the band was in high spirits in that show. They were joking around, playing around. And,
still,
you know, this show being 2 days later. Yeah, exactly. So this was a great run of shows. If you go back to Charlottesville, which had a great set list, then Charlotte, then New Orleans. I remember in 2013, like, here being in Atlanta, like, wait, we're getting skipped again? What's happening? Like, we're right in between Charlotte and New Orleans. Like, that would have been a cool Halloween show. So I remember I drove up to Charlotte for that one, but I didn't end up going to New Orleans. And after hearing about it, I was extremely jealous that wasn't happening in Atlanta.
Oh man, sorry to hear it. Just a quick teaser on whether or not it's worthwhile. If, you know, people are listening to it right now, like, yeah, another Pearl Jam show, yeah, at a festival, really. In addition to Eddie swinging on the lights that are hanging down by the end of the show and, you know, passing a bottle around, you know, like he does, he's dancing with furries on stage, and he's
amazing.
Making fun of the jacuzzi section. I mean, there's some incredible highlights that make this show really special. And
we're going to have to talk about that jacuzzi section because he mentioned that, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, ooh, that is anti Eddie right there. That is anti everything they stand for. So when he mentions it, I want to know more about this jacuzzi section, because you've seen it in NFL games now and baseball games. They have a pool in you know, the home run territory or something like that. So I'm going to guess it's probably the same.
If you were in the jacuzzi section, send us an email, live on 4 Legs Podcast.
And then John will come to your house and fight
know
you.
How it was. That's right.
Oh, that's great. Well, he had a very valid complaint because the VIP section was enormous and it cut out a lot of the area where these, you know, super fans would otherwise be. But it's just people who are sitting there, you know, with big open spaces and kind of sipping cocktails and waving their arms to Jeremy. You don't want that kind of shit at your show.
No, that's, yeah.
At least not up front.
Right, exactly. So a little background on Steve Gleason. You know, I think most people know who he is by now and what his connection to Pearl Jam is. You know, he's one of very few people that have made a Pearl Jam set list in full. Many, you know, popular fans and celebrity fans and a fan, Brian Farias, created the Amsterdam set list. Patrick Warburton got to create a set in L.A. a couple years back. I think their crew got to create a set. He even let Jeff Ament create a set this past year, which was nice of him to do. Which I think that
all he had to do was be in the band for 29 years
and have it be in his hometown. I don't even know if he created the whole thing. It was just like, okay, you want B girl? Do you want pilot? All right, we'll give you those two, but everything else is mine. You see, this is my band. But Steve Gleason has done something that almost nobody, a very, very small fraction of people have been able to wiggle their self into. And a little background on him and how he's kind of famous in the world of sports. After Hurricane Katrina, the Saints didn't play in the Superdome the whole year. So 2006, they come back to the Superdome. It's Monday Night Football. It's the first week of the season. And I can't remember if it was the very first play of the game or in the first quarter. There's a blocked punt. And right away, that was Steve Gleason.
He was like he was like a backup receiver or something. He wasn't like a
special
teams guy, but he made this amazing play. And I think there's a statue of him in the city now of that play. Yeah,
there's indeed a statue up in the Superdome, and he became kind of this sort of cult hero in a way. And unfortunately, at the age of 35 or 36, something like that, he succumbed to ALS, and he's still fighting it to this day. But watching that video that we were talking about before, the feature that NFL Countdown ran, he said that doctors gave him 3 to 5 years to live. Well, it's 6 years now. It's probably more, considering that they didn't make the feature, right after he was diagnosed. So he's winning this battle right now. Like, as much as he can be winning this battle, he is beating the odds, which is kind of amazing to see. And we're obviously all rooting for him as fans of his and fans of the band. It is amazing to see something like this happen, because there was a show last year where Ed had mentioned somebody who was battling ALS, and unfortunately that person had passed since that show, and it's only been a year. So that's, unfortunately, like, these things happen, and it's
heartbreaking.
I think, yeah, it really is. Like, he has a young kid. I think he has 2 kids now. He has a wife. He has family. I read more things, and they released a documentary about him over the past year, which I haven't watched yet. I'm meaning to watch it, but really, it's it's just more of a way for him to do a video documentary to show his sons what his life was like and what kind of person he was like, and sort of him living out the end of his life the way he was doing it. It's kind of heartbreaking to see, and that he got this shot to come on stage, and honestly, this intro right here says it all.
This is my dear friend Steve Gleason right here. Please give him a big round of applause. He's got some stuff he wants to say to you.
Hey there. Welcome to New Orleans and welcome to Voodoo People. I hope you're enjoying this so far. This next band has been rocking stages like this for almost 25 years. New Orleans has become my hometown, but this is my hometown band. Ladies and gentlemen of Voodoo, please welcome to the stage one of the greatest American rock bands ever, Pearl Jam.
It really just shows how much the band truly has this respect and admiration for him, that he got to be alongside them on stage. And he's helping them pick the soundtrack for the night, but he's also, it tells you that this is a mutual relationship. This isn't just a charity case, that, this was all heartfelt. And he said it in the feature. He said that they weren't acting out of pity. They weren't acting out of charity. He makes a really good connection with Mike because of Crohn's disease and Mike battling that throughout the years. So, there is a major connection between him and the band. And, I don't think I realized this until that feature came out, but Sirens is such a prominent song in this, this latter stages of the band. And this is what they open with here.
Hear the sirens. Hear the sirens. Hear the sirens. Hear the circus so profound. I hear the sirens more and more in this here town. Oh, let me catch my breath and breathe and reach across the bend. Oh, just to know where safe I am, a grateful man. This light is bit of light and I can see you then. Have to take your hand and feel your breath, or feel the someday will be over. I'll pull you close, so much to lose, knowing that nothing lasts forever. I didn't care before you were here. I danced in laughter with me ever after. But all these chains left this remain.
When the show went on and I saw the set list, I'm thinking to myself, this and Sirens being the soundtrack to the future, holy shit, Sirens was basically written about Steve Gleason. And if not written exactly about his situation, it's almost purposefully about how life is, nothing is guaranteed and how hard it is to.
I mean, it's about appreciating what you have and just living in the moment and all those things that when you're around people like that or who've inspired you and see people battling like that, it probably resonated with Eddie a lot and made him want to write something special for it.
Fuck, man. I'd never thought about it through the lens of Steve. And you're right, that definitely puts it in a very different context and connotation that very much applies if you lay the lyrics into it. That's a really interesting theory. I'm fully behind it. And it's kind of funny that you bring up Sirens. I mean, obviously it's the first song, it's the first place to begin, but the moment that song began, and I'm like welling up just fucking thinking about it, Jesus. The moment that song began, I knew that this was not a festival show. I knew that this was not going to be the hits run kind of fun adventure, because that might be the closest thing to the new single or whatever, but to open with that when it's so poignant and so sentimental and like deeply emotive, not in a black kind of way, talking about heartache, but I mean there's very complex emotions and like the fear of, like you said, not being able to be there for your family and the priorities of what it means to be a grown-up, rather than to be focused on, the love of one person or whatever. It was profound. And I was, without going too deep into it, I was going through some pretty intense personal relationship stuff at the time. And, having kids, that puts it in a much heavier context. And so I was applying a lot of those lyrics and a lot of that story through my own filter, through my own lens, and that hit me like a bag of rocks when it first started. But to then hear that there's, that Steve Gleason connection, and then that he actually wrote the set list, like, man, yeah, that's heavy.
And I don't know if you noticed this at all, but I don't think I've ever noticed this out of any Pearl Jam performance outside of, I guess like the Rockin' in the Free Worlds and the All Hands on Deck kind of songs, but every single member of the band is singing backup in this song.
Yes.
Stone's singing backup, Jeff is singing backup, Matt, Mike usually singing backup in the song. They're all doing it, and they're all
outside
doing
of maybe the hallelujah part for Do the Evolution or something.
Oh, sure, yeah, but that's again like jokey things, but
right.
This is every single person is bringing something, and it's almost like they're all giving it back to Steve.
Like you said, all of them singing, back up and really being present. You feel that, you see that, and that's a dedication that played out through the next, 26, 25 songs. And holy shit, what a great show it was.
Yeah, and right off the bat, like you get from Sirens into In My Tree, and again, you're thinking festival set lists and openers, not even Release and not even Pendulum, which was the obvious opener at the time, but it's usually stuff like Go. It's usually stuff like Corduroy, maybe even a Why Go here and there. But this is sort of, I feel like In My Tree was a really good just sort of balance between the emotion from Sirens and then having to get into stuff like Save You, Corduroy, Animal, Lightning Bolt, Mind Your Manners all packaged. And I really feel like this one was one that Steve said right off the top, like this is another poignant one that he would request, specifically because of the lyrics, because it's kind of, you're in your sort of your own domain. You're almost fighting by yourself when nobody else is there to help you fight your battles. It's got that same mentality to it. A lot of these songs, and we'll go through Given a Fly, Inside Job, a lot of these songs have that same air of just just life and fragility. But getting In My Tree at a festival show, not something that you're gonna get almost at any time.
The pulverizing drums, that was something that
Yes.
was like the way that Matt kicked into those drums to start the song.
Let's get it going. The great outdoors. Up here in my tree, yeah. Oh, newspapers matter not to me. Oh.
We've heard how many versions of In My Tree by now, but there's the way that he was leaning into that opening beat and the way that was thunderous. It reminded me of Jack Irons. It reminded me of when this song was first kind of rolling out, and they kind of had something to prove with it, and it was thrilling. Yeah, I don't disagree at all.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite Pearl Jam songs, and love this version. Like the drums, the McCready solo at the end, they were on another level.
And I'm happy to have you back, original version of In My Tree, because it feels like the last, 3 or 4 times that we've covered the song, it's been the extended 2003 through 2006 version, where it's the longer intro, the paced chorus. while I love both versions, I really, when I hear the original now, it's kind of like, it feels right. It feels special again to get it, because, when we're not listening to a show that we cover, it's hard to do the work-life balance with this stuff, and it's hard to listen to other bootlegs just for fun. So getting an In My Tree that sounds like In My Tree was good to have it back.
I agree.
So right here, it's just, again, a banger of all of your very typical festival set songs. Save You, Corduroy Animal, Lightning Bolt, Mind Your Manners, packaged together, 5 songs, bam, 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 bam. It's straightforward choices to win a big crowd over, and you're coming off of what was a very emotional first 10 minutes of that set, and you're now saying, all right, you know what? We have a little extra step in us. We have some energy. It's time to bring it. And this is what you were kind of expecting from this night, I'm going to assume.
Yeah, you hit that, that high energy stride. Like you said, there were 6, 7, 8 songs that were, bangers, and you hit that stretch of high energy and kind of keeping everybody in the zone. And before Given to Fly, which, arguably kind of slowed things down a little bit at first, Eddie kind of kept the energy going and kept it high by talking. He made a couple comments about getting arrested in New Orleans, and
yes.
He was asking for a show of hands who's been arrested in New Orleans and so on. He's like, I should raise my hand, and kind of keeping the comical spirits of the night, running. He asked who planned on getting arrested later that night, and he told them about a guy they could call, a fellow Seattleite, and so on. And it was this big lead up to him talking about
he flubbed that. He flubbed that last number. I really wanted Macklemore's phone number.
Right. And so he said he'll pay your bail or give you $10 to buy some big floppy old man shoes. And actually gave, I don't know if that was his real phone number. I doubt it, but he dedicated.
I don't know. It like. Obviously, you can say 206, yada 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 yada, but he kind of sounded like he had to stop himself from spilling the beans for a second. And didn't he give his number?
He's been known to give out his number on more than one occasion.
Oh really? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Well, this was going back a ways, but
yeah, he dedicated "Given to Fly" to Macklemore. From that, and it was a nice touch, and there was a lot of that kind of goofiness, but also with a little bit of sociopolitical edge to it. I think it was before Severed Hand. Yeah, Ed introduced Severed Hand as a song about all the overdoses on marijuana, up in Seattle since it was legalized, and then he's waited for applause or pause, and then said, obviously I'm joking because that's never fucking happened ever, and that was great to hear. We're 6 years out from that show, and the legalization battle in a lot of states isn't even an issue anymore. But at the time, there was still a lot of that reefer madness stigma going around. So it was cool to hear him, say that. And I probably had a joint hanging out of my mouth at the time. So,
Given to Fly, I don't want to get off track here, but Given to Fly, again, another coming from Steve Gleason, and it's look, when you look at the set list, and you can say, sure, he created the set list, but I have to think that there has to be some influence from the band in there, because if you're a hardcore fan, you have to be thinking, well, I want MFC, and I want Red Mosquito, and I want this and that, but it's a festival show, so there needs to be some balance. So I wonder if Ed said, hey, look, request some good songs, but also know that we got to play Corduroy and Animal and Jeremy.
An even flow, of course.
Right, yeah. So, but this one is one that I'm sure that Gleason was like, okay, we have to have it. And the reason being is around 2016, around when his documentary came out and when he came and introduced the band for Inside Job at Wrigley Field, he did this playlist this playlist article that ESPN put out, and Pearl Jam's on there, I think, 3 times. Every other band has only one song, but Given to Fly was one of them, and I want to read the reasoning why this is special to Steve. So it says, I think there's a special connection to my family and our group of friends. For me, and this is about mostly about Mike, and because Mike wrote the song. For me and my friends, Given to Fly was always one of those songs where the band is in mid-song and we'd look at each other and say, how amazing is this song and the story and this performance. And it's one thing to sing about a wave crashing like a fist to the jaw, and it's another thing altogether to have actually your body physically crushed by disease. So this song and its tune and its lyrics have strengthened me in my times of trouble, because Given to Fly sits as a fortress in the trailer for the upcoming film and underpins the soundtrack of the movie. And that, to me, it explains everything. That's a perfect analogy for what he was going through.
Right. Damn.
If you notice too, he's finger picking the intro. I don't know if he normally does that. Maybe it was on purpose, to slow it down.
Interesting.
Maybe so they wouldn't play it too fast, but if you watch the video, he's actually, he's finger picking it. It makes it sound a little different and a little slower.
Could've tuned in, but he tuned out. A bad time nothing could save him. Alone in a corridor, waiting locked out. He got up out of there, ran for hundreds of miles. He made it to New Orleans, had a smoke in a tree. The wind rose up, set him down on his knees.
Fly kind of leads its way into a couple here, and it's hard to section these because there's certain ones that I really want to point out, but before going into Getaway, Ed talks about this one's about intolerance and all the things that we're intolerant about, and we're intolerant to intolerance and all that. It goes into Getaway, which is the second performance of the song, and John, you mentioned Charlotte before, and that was the debut night of Getaway, which was something that, throughout that whole tour on Lightning Bolt, everybody was asking, when's Getaway happening, because it's the opening track to the album. It's one of the better songs. It's one of the ones that sort of fits that, older timeline. It has some grit to it. And we discussed in that episode that it just didn't have that same flair, that same vigor that the album version has, and I feel like they're still in that zone, even though later on they seem to find it a little bit and find the riff a little bit, but I think they're in that same zone here with Getaway.
Charlotte was a little rough. I thought this one was better. It definitely had a better pace and rhythm to it. I liked it a lot.
I think we have to mention Even Flow here for one reason. It's a nice little callback to St. Louis 2000. There's an interpreter in front of the stage, and in the middle of the second verse, Ed sort of gives attention to her. And I don't know if you guys noticed, but he changed the lyric to say fuck to try to get her to give the middle finger. Did you notice that?
Oh, yeah.
And I don't think she did. I think she kind of laughed it off and went in a different direction from that. But again, Even Flow, Shredfest, Mike, we know the whole ordeal by now.
It has kind of a cool he does it kind of everybody kind of drops out, it kind of decreases, and then Mike kind of does a little jazzy guitar thing. I don't know if it was a little snippet of something, but then everybody kind of comes back in. It was cool the way it kind of they brought it down and then brought it back up. It was not something you get every time.
Even Flow is one of those songs that you hear at every show, and it's not the go get a beer song, but it's definitely it's Even Flow. All right. And
it's 10 minutes long.
Yeah. And Matt's got maybe a drum solo, and Mike's going to, throw some shit down. But this one was real special to me outside of the interpreter moment, just because Mike was absolutely on fire. I mean, what he did with the solo was unbelievable. It just ripped, and not to mention he played the whole thing behind his head, or at least most of it, And
I mean, that's come to be expected by now.
It's come to be
It's
expected,
not as
but,
hard to do as you might think.
It just fucking shredded so hard, though. It was such a good solo, and it's like, wait, wait, that was all behind his head. Like, holy shit.
Oh, in this whole show, McCready's on another level because he's playing for Steve Gleason, who's standing next to him. He's in another stratosphere in this show.
And I'm directly in front of Mike for the show, remember? So I'm shit-eating grin on my face. And, of everybody in the band at this point, Mike's crowd work is, exceeds anybody else's. It's unparalleled.
We'll talk about it later. Mike is swatting the lighting bulbs, and he's running through the crowd around the time that Alive and Rockin' come out. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, this is a very special Mike show. He that connection with Gleason is definitely rubbing off on him, and that sort of is a reason why I want to take the next song and focus on this a little bit, but because again, present tense, the lyrics, and living in the moment, living in now, living for today, not worrying, leaving the past behind. Again, one that I'm just attributing to Steve Gleason. And you mentioned how Ed was howling during that part there, and the band was so tight during that section. And sometimes in present tense, they have this tendency to just, it kind of gets a little dazed. I don't want to say lackadaisical, but it's just a little, I don't know, it's just a little more melodical. But this one was straight up hard rock.
Yeah, I fully agree. And like I said, Ed's throat, I mean, he was screaming that the part of the chorus, and it was just, you could tell there's real power behind it and intent, and they wanted to do it right. And that's something, I don't know, when the band hits the stage and you get the sense that they want to turn in a good show, like, that's just really exciting because they don't fail when it comes to that,
And then when you get to the bridge of this one, did you hear Ed? It's like he's kind of lost in the moment, and he keeps saying, "That's the way, that's the way." Makes much more sense in the present day. Bringing this other presence to it that just especially for this song that has such an intense ending that develops, it really sounds fantastic on this night.
Yeah, it's a tremendous song and a great performance for sure.
After this is where the weed legalization comes in.
All the overdoses, right?
Yep, lots of overdoses since then. Counting on one hand, zero overdoses leading into Severed Hand. Severed Hand, again, not going to talk about a lot about set construction here, but you don't see Severed Hand in the middle part of the set, and we've done a lot of the 2006 shows in the recent years, so Severed Hand has been up towards the top, number 3, number 4 within that first batch of songs. So getting it here is a little, it's the one part of the set construction that I have a little issue with, but only because it's unfamiliar.
Huh. I like the unfamiliarity.
I think it's probably the best live song off of Avocado, the way it translates, if not
again,
first or second. So
nitpicky.
I think it works anywhere. Yeah, it's
completely nitpicking, and it's not going to ruin my rating for the show or my enjoyment for the show at all, because it was performed well and all that. And I do think that in other circumstances, Daughter following present tense would have been the way to go here, and it was a really, really good Daughter with some good another brick in the wall tag on this one.
Yeah. See, I really enjoyed the fact that they brought it up with Severed Hand before going into Daughter. And had they done that directly from present tense, I think there's maybe a residual poignancy that would carry over in a certain way that I don't know. It's each their own as far as that goes, in the process of the set list. But Daughter was great. I wouldn't say it was particularly remarkable. It had
I feel that about Daughter all the time, and I keep fighting myself. I'm like, when is there going to be a Daughter that just outside of a showbox kind of performance? But when is there going to be a Daughter that's got a tag that doesn't have that like. It's the same spiel. And John, I know you're you're on Team Daughter more.
I will fight both of you.
There it is. John has just put the challenge down.
Hey, it's a great song. I'm not against it by any means. I think we could do a little bit with some variety there though at the end.
Well, I mean, again, you don't get another brick in the wall as much as you did back in the 90s. So. And again, I've talked about this, the shows I've been to, as soon as they go into the Daughter tag, you hear everyone on the front row start singing it anyway. Mm-hmm. So this is the one that people still go to when they think of Daughter tag. So I'm sure it was great for the people that were there, people that remember that Saturday Night Live performance and Atlanta 94 and all that. I thought it was excellent.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's, for the people who've been fans as long as we have, that's, the SNL performance in 94 or the 94 performance, the Fox Theater in Atlanta, those are tattooed on our hearts. So it's really hard to hit that standard, but, in this particular version, the band just you felt it kind of petered out. I'm sure he kind of signaled to him, towards the end there or whatever, but it felt like, do we keep going? Are we going to keep going? Okay. All right, we're done.
I think they realized that, hey, this is a festival. We're kind of on a budget here. We need to kind of keep things moving. And if it were any other Daughter, there would have been another, couple sequences of ayo and all that crap. Right. But I do appreciate that it was it was sectioned off and trimmed down a little bit.
I hear the
Shut
heavy
up,
breathing.
John. Jeremy in front of a festival crowd, it never fails, but it's always the one that going back to the Made in America show that I complained about before, that I usually go back and complain about on this show. Two people standing in front of me once the bass riff comes into Jeremy, and I don't think they made a face the whole entire night, but once that bass riff comes in, they're like, oh, I know this one, and it's just like, it's an eye roll. But you know what? Like, that's not any sort of negative comment on the song itself, because the performance was really good. But this is a must play at a festival.
Yeah, I don't think you can get around that.
The Jacuzzi folks.
I was kind of surprised that, obviously Steve Gleason wrote the set list, but I was surprised that Small Town wasn't on it, because it's such a sing-along song and such an easy transition into that kind of feel-good collaboration.
And you know what? No Better Man on this either, which is interesting.
Yeah.
So, again, Steve is picking the set. He's making the decisions here, but and I think there was another... I think in 2016 there was another New Orleans show, Jazz Fest, that I think he did a lot of, at least made a lot of choices for. And we'll get to that for another song that comes up. Did
they play Atlanta in 2016?
No, they don't play Atlanta.
That one got skipped as well.
They left their hearts in the Fox Theater. This one, though, obviously we had mentioned the song before and the connection to Steve Gleason, but Ed says that he's giving a toast to Steve and his family, and there's shots in the crowd of Steve smiling, which if you watch the feature, Steve has trouble smiling. When even when he's talking about emotional things, there were moments where he was with his son where you can see he was trying to put together a smile. He has a legit full Cheshire cat grin at this point. It's really, I don't know difficult that is for him or what, but like it was kind of, I was shocked. I was a little,
well, I mean,
I was shocked by that.
Think about the context of it. It's just like your favorite band that you've developed this incredible connection with is now playing a show that you designed, and they never do that. It's such an extreme rarity. Yeah, I think I certainly couldn't imagine.
I mean, he's gonna remember this. He's gonna remember this forever.
And not only that, but like the most important thing that we've said for him is to document his life, to show his sons what kind of person he was, so his sons get to see that shot of him in the crowd smiling when they mention his name, knowing that, hey, and there was a story back, that same playlist article that I read, that he went to go see them in Missoula for the first time, traveling from, he is a, I wouldn't say a Seattle guy, but he is a Washington guy, so he's local with the band. And he mentions like how crazy of a trip that was, and that's the sort of thing that's probably going through his head. He's like, I was just a kid back then. I didn't know that any of this would happen, and now I'm sitting here, and these guys that are talking to me, they're my friends, and I just selected the songs for them to play, and it's what's going on through his head is something that unfortunately none of us peons would ever be able to experience on that kind of level, but it defines the fact that music is more powerful than life, and can inspire so many great things that we can't control, that just inspires happiness and inspires absolute joy.
It's got power.
Yeah, and maybe it takes something like that. Sorry to interrupt you, but maybe it takes a terrible experience or a terrible position to be in, a tragedy like he's gone through, to really root yourself in the moment. And even though it might be painful to smile or what have you, but to recognize that like maybe this is as good as it gets in life. Not to say that his limitations make it so that's as good as it gets, but like, and to have a band playing all of your favorite songs to you with thousands of people around you and like have that respect and introduction. Like there's something really profoundly impactful about that I don't know, there were a lot of people wiping away a lot of tears when he was brought up and discussed and when he came out and so on.
And with the way that this song, written by Mike, the only song, lyrics and music written by Mike, the way that it's produced and the way that it's it shows this vulnerability into what Mike has dealt with and what he's become as a person, and how he chooses to fight his battles. It speaks for I think a lot of us. I see the connection to him and these lyrics of these songs, and it's powerful. It's just amazing what music can do to you sometimes.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's just a testament to the profound power of music. And I've gone through, we talked earlier about going through different stages in life of what music does to you, how it moves you, how it affects you, whether it be this band or music in general. And I think I've gone through a cynical time where I would scoff a little bit at somebody saying they've been saved by music or, something along those lines. But now looking back, I feel like a real asshole, taking that position for any length of time, just because it's so consistently and so profoundly impactful and can completely change, the four chords can completely change your outlook on the day. And if I'm in a bad mood or if I'm really down or, whatever, there's a few go-to songs that I have that I know hands down are going to pull me out of this.
This is the anthem to the show for me. It speaks to what this show is.
Yeah.
We got the end of the set here, though. It's State of Love and Trust and Rearview Mirror. And another connection with State of Love and Trust, I mentioned before, Jazz Fest. Steve Gleason and his wife kind of picked a bunch of the songs from that Jazz Fest show a couple years ago, and one of the ones that they said that I was reading from that same playlist article, which I'm going to have to post now. I've mentioned it 3 times. It's got great stuff. So, you know, and it's not anything shocking. It's all stuff that everyone's going to say, wow, this is stuff I've been listening to for the past 25 years. So it's, you know, it's right up your alley. And he said, you know, his wife says to him, like, they really need to do State of Love and Trust tonight. So Steve comes out at Jazz Fest, introduces the band again, and not something they do at all. Same with Sirens, but open the show, State of Love and Trust, and that's like 1993 kind of shit right there. Like, hell yeah. You know, yeah, like that's what, you know, and this version of State of Love and Trust is fantastic, but like that's making me think of that moment and going back to that. That's kind of crazy.
Yeah, man, that's not enough good can ever be said about that song, as far as I'm concerned.
I agree.
You know, even the sloppiest version in live performance is like, fuck yeah, we got State of Love and Trust.
Rearview Mirror ending this first set. John, you mentioned that you really like this version. After you mentioned you like this version, I realized how much I really like this version. The first thing that sticks out to me, middle of the chorus, of the second chorus, there are no lights on him. You know, the brownish orange light that usually comes out during Rearview Mirror that's supposed to look like a headlight, which I guess I just put together right now. Apparently that wasn't in Ed's face enough for him to see the crowd. So, you know, middle of it, I couldn't breathe. Killy, I can't see.
Right.
Just blurts it out.
Fist on my plate, Keely, I can't see. I'm bringing that fucking down.
You get into the later section of this song, the bridge, and we always mention what the bridge sounds like and what they're doing and what they're experimenting with, but Ed does a little bit of improvising here. He says, I can't forget, I will forgive, and he kind of keeps repeating it. It sounded really powerful.
I will forgive. I can forgive. I will forgive what I can't forget. I will forgive. I will forgive. Still out there. Can you feel it? You got something to run away from, something to get away from. Let's outrun every asshole we ever see. Let's get farther and farther and farther and farther and farther and farther in front of them. They can't touch us no more.
And then, you know, you get the clapping from the crowd, and you get Ed sort of going into this diatribe of, you know, let's run away from every asshole we've ever met. And it's lifting you to this level of, like, you know, it's sort of empowering you again. Like, John, you were saying how much you like this version.
Yeah, I mean, they've played Rearview Mirror 500 times. There's not a bad version, and you know, I love the little speech at the end where he's, like I've said before, he's so charismatic. Like he knows when he's got the crowd in the palm of his hand, and he just grabs them at this point and takes them with him on that little speech. You know, like, here we go, guys, come on with me. We're gonna do this, and it's just one of those special moments that you get during the song. I totally loved
agree
it.
with you. And this is, as far as I'm concerned, top 5 Rearview Mirrors I've ever seen.
Wow.
it like continually escalated and kept getting more and more intense and more exciting, you know. And Ed's little ad-libbing, or, you know, whatever he was saying there, I'll forget but I won't forgive, or, you know, whatever he was saying, really kind of, you know, sucked you in even further. And his energy was something that I think we were feeding off of more than maybe anything else outside of, you know, maybe Mike. But he was very clearly into it and very clearly excited about how things were going. You could tell that, like, this was a moment that they were owning, and whether it be, you know, feeling like they were doing Steve proud by doing it right, you know, by putting on a killer show, or just the execution of it, you know, at this festival. It was profoundly awesome, and I've gone back to this song from this show so many times. It's just so explosive and intense, and it has a whole new vitality. You know, the song was like 20 years old by that point.
I think we've seen such a transformation of this one over the years with experimenting with what Stone has done, and, you know, we've talked about versions of the bridge that sounded like the Beatles, versions that sounded like the Grateful Dead, versions that sounded like Pink Floyd, and, you know, it's the one, again, thing that you keep thinking that the band can't top what they did the last time, and then they find a way to change your mind. They find a way to top what you thought couldn't be topped. And again, Rearview Mirror for me, like, has always been up there as a top 10 favorite. And sometimes I keep thinking to myself, I'm like, well, if I hear it again live, like, it's not going to have that same passion as it did the last time. And they find a way. They find a way with it. So this one, yeah, you saying that it's a top 5 out of almost 60 songs, you must have seen him probably 45 or so times, I would think, ish.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, so that's profound by saying, putting that in that league. We're in the encore here now. Ed is saying he's going easy on the wine, but still plenty left, and gives a little nod to there's plenty left. It gives a little nod to Nine Inch Nails and Trent Reznor, who would play on the Saturday date. I believe this is Friday that the show is on, and right. Yeah. And then he goes off a little bit and he says, a company that would remain nameless, but I'll say their initials, BP. A funny line, one of the best lines of the night. And he kind of goes off on, you know, their advertisement campaign, putting money into just apologizing and saying everything was fine when it very obviously wasn't. And, you know, kind of goes into, you know, ways that the community has been affected and ways that, you know, you can help. Chloe Dancer, Crown of Thorns. I hate to bring this up, but Chloe was a little bit off on this. Him and Boom were not quite on the same page at first.
You're channeling your
no, I'm not, because I've had my own issues with the music before, and I will say it when I have to say it, and this one has to be said. And you'll notice that Matt had a little hi-hat beat going, and Matt had to stop to get Boom and Eddie on track with each other, because they were completely off.
I agree to an extent, and I'm not going to be so, you know, deluded as to suggest that it was intentional. But there's something in the dissonance of that recording, and I've gone back to it a couple times, like I said. It adds to the appeal. I don't know why. There's that initial almost clunkiness is it feels to me like kind of like an old pickup kind of getting into gear before it hits like its stride. And you know, not to besmirch the song by any means, there's a mysticism to the song that almost gets humanized a little bit at that beginning part.
Chloe don't know better. Chloe's just like me, only beautiful. Don't tell her. A couple of years difference in those lessons I never learned.
know what you're talking about with Matt and the hi-hat and everything, but I don't know, for some reason it contributes to it because it's not as perfectly polished, and it grows and becomes this monster as it does, and the chorus is immortal. But yeah, it's funny how that took away from it for you, because I was like, yeah, it spiced it up for me a little.
But you know what? Now you're sort of selling me. I'm kind of back in, because I was more like, hey, this doesn't sound right, instead of like, oh, they figured it out, and it's sort of, it just kind of it took a little turn for them, like you said, the pickup truck, and now it's kind of, okay, the engine's on, and it's a bit of a smooth ride. It did smoothen itself out, and it was kind of, now thinking about it, it was an interesting transition into how it ended up smooth. So like that hey, you brought a unique take to it, and I'm buying in on it now. So
yeah, see, Eddie didn't fuck up the lyrics. It wasn't something that was like an obvious, like, oh God, moment.
And we talked about it too. We talked about it a lot on the MSG episode, where they have a tendency to bring out Crown of Thorns in places where Andy would have liked to play, or where they kind of feel his spirit. I think New Orleans is a town that Andy would have loved to have played. So I figured that's one reason that it came up in this show.
And didn't they play it for the first time in Vegas at their
that was the anniversary
10th
show,
anniversary show, right? I was there.
Yep.
That's crazy. That's awesome. I never thought of it that way, but that makes a lot of sense. I'd say that's a pretty sound theory.
It has this such an important place in this band's history, and just that shot in PJ20 of where essentially the narration behind it is when Ed mentions to Stone that he wants to play Mother Love Bone song, and you can see Stone's face light up. I don't know if that was the moment where Ed mentioned something to him, or they just found the right frame to use, but it was that's the kind of moment that makes this very special. And again, another really good version of Crown of Thorns that you just can't. In 2013, it becomes more commonplace, but you can't say enough about what Crown of Thorns means to this band and this legacy of Seattle music.
Totally agree.
After that, get back on the horse a little bit, Evolution and Go, which is a great combo, digging back into the set. It would have been a little bit more seamless, but I think Ed was having a little bit of an acid trip, because as you mentioned before, we got some friends in the audience here. There's a white rabbit and a unicorn, and Ed mentions, he's like, it's kind of like when you read on that Sonic Youth record about being sexually aroused around stuffed animals. And then he says to the mascots, he says, my hotel, I'm at the whatever inn, the Ramada, and he's like, find me later. And that'll come back into play once at the end of the set, which we're almost at here. But again, really, you need these songs in a festival set, especially going in before Black, which is another fantastic version of Black.
And you notice too, during Go, he went back to the interpreter and tried to get her to do the flip the bird again. He throw a couple extra fucks in there.
For as good as he is, for as good of a human being that we've talked about him being throughout this show, he's a bit of a dick too. So
he's playful about it though. He's not. Yeah, he's not kicking people out for smoking weed. That kind of a dick. No. I mean, that's a straight up asshole.
Only if they're overdosing.
Right. If you can't hold it, you got to go.
Black here. We double up on the do-do-do-do-do-do's. Another powerful mic performance. What's that?
No, I was fucking with you.
I didn't even hear what you said.
I said, is that what they're officially called? The do-do-do-do-do-do.
What else would you call them?
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Just messing with you.
They are do-do-do-do's. I kind of like how Ed ties in the band introductions into this. They kind of, they kind of keep that pace going. The crowd keeps singing the do-do-do-do-do's. And He's going through everybody and introducing them, which would usually be like an encore 2 type of thing, and that's sort of, I guess, that territory where we are in this set. If you're comparing this festival to a regular arena show, but it was really a nice thank you that Ed kind of gave to the crowd for just being a part of this night, and I think the crowd, the band was really genuine in their response back to the band. That it was obviously very special to Steve. So again, all coming full circle here. So. Another terrific version of the song that I really got no complaints, but nothing absolutely killing me here on black. John, did you're the black aficionado here?
Well, again, it's the McCready show. Yeah. Like he takes over. I love it when he goes up to the amp and gets a little bit of the feedback, and he's really feeling it. And that's the part of the song that this makes it special for me.
Yeah, and I mean, you get it every single time, but every single time it's going to mean something new or something different or something more. And obviously, we've mentioned Steve's name thousands of times, and that's what it's all for on this one. And your festival show ends with Bread and Butter, Alive, Rockin' in the Free World, Yellow Ledbetter. But it's a really fun ending, and it feels like a huge party at the end here. You have, Ed's passing out the tambourines during Alive. Mike swatting the swinging lights with his guitar. At one point, I think it was Alive, that Mike and Ed are both running around the floor.
I did think it was funny to watch these security guards chasing them through the crowd. That was
Ed was riding one of the lights at one point. I've got a picture of him having jumped on and was swinging around on it. Yeah, and it was during that time. I think it was during Rockin' in the Free World where, Ed was kind of hopping on and off these things, and everybody's swinging them all around. And like you said, it felt like a party, and they were dancing with the furries on stage and all of that. At one point, Ed turned to the crowd right in front of me and looked what seemed to be directly at me, and just had this shit-eating, accomplished grin on his face that, again, I had my camera with me because I was there. I was going to go into the photo pit. Like I said, I was like 3 or 4 rows back in the actual crowd, though, and I got this shot of him just looking dead on into the camera, shit-eating grin on his face, just looking accomplished and sweaty and happy. And I remember I screamed the moment I snapped the shot because I knew that was the one. And I took like 3 or 4 after that where like he just makes a weird face, like sets his jaw to the side and has like a goofy look. But that's the one that I'll be sending you guys talking about in terms of my best Pearl Jam shot or better shot at least. Because, you don't get too many of those like big grinning Eddies, especially when he's kind of feeling goofy.
Right. And he's passing around the wine bottle too, so
for sure
he's had more than enough. It's New Orleans, right. And who knows if he's getting arrested again that night.
Right.
This stage is just batshit insane right now. The interpreter is back during Ledbetter and gets spotlighted on again. I don't think he was trying to say fuck this time, but I could be wrong.
I don't think so.
Not knowing what those lyrics are half the time, who the hell knows? She probably was just like, I give up. You take it from here.
There's a box and a bag. Just go with it.
Yeah.
You give them the finger this time. 25 song finish, no encore 2, but in this rare case, I don't think the set needed it. It finished up nicely, and it finished up appropriately because back on stage is Steve Gleason, and Mike is playing right in front of him, and it's almost like he was the last, that was his only audience at that moment when he's finishing the show, doing the last part of Ledbetter. going off, and it's like the only person that he's performing to is Steve, and he goes right in, he gives him a big hug, and again, you can see that smile on Steve's face, that something, one of the best moments of his life has just occurred.
Yeah, that was really profound, to be there and to understand the context a little bit better, and to watch that and see the attention that he was given, at the end there. And I think you nailed it. It seemed like he was playing to an audience of one, and he sounded, he was throwing Stevie Ray Vaughan shit in there. It sounded very kind of Stevie Little Wing, element. Yeah. And it was fire. It was so great. And there was that, poignant, cathartic sort of conclusive energy to it, the end of the party once, New Year's Eve is coming to an end kind of thing. But we got all we needed to. We were satiated, and for a festival show, holy shit. Like it's still just such a surprise that it came off like that, even for New Orleans, even for the magic of that, place and experience.
Yeah, I was very, knowing all of the details that went on with Steve picking the set, and seeing a festival set from afar, you think like, okay, well, inside job is a little rare, and present tense is, getting 2 no code songs is a little different, but like, it was, in my critical spot, looking at it from afar, I'm like, okay, this is a little chalk, but the night is not that. That's why we pick special shows to do, and this is one of them, and this is kind of defines that this was less about, the rarities in the set list and how different it was from the last night. It was about the emotion that was poured into it, and about how the crowd responded. And you were there. I couldn't imagine what it would have been like to be sitting there, while Steve is on stage at the end. But man, that's probably right in front of you too, right?
Yeah, that was right in front of me, and it was a tearful experience. If you're tuned into it, and you can't tell somebody else how to experience a concert, and when the people all around you are jumping up and down and all excited and happy, and like you're feeling that too, but there's also this added element of poignance of like there's a deeper meaning here. There's something really profoundly special happening for that person, for Steve, and to see the impact that it had and to understand it, through the full scope. I mean, it's an emotional time, even to think back on. I've got goosebumps in my arms right now looking at it.
It's going to be very difficult to do, but let's pick your top 3 favorite moments of the show. Johnny, you can go first.
Oh man. Well, top 3 favorite moments of the show. I had gone with songs, but I think moments.
Moments, songs. It's either or. Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's something about the furries moment was certainly wild. It was one of my favorites just because it was so unique and because Ed was so playful about it. But if I could go back, to any experiences, that's not what I would pick. I would have to say Rearview Mirror, to be there for that song. And to be there for present tense, the way that was presented, and the like I said, the power of the song, the way that Eddie was when he was singing, especially in the chorus, those 2 really stand out for me. And again, it goes back for me to Chloe Dancer and Crown of Thorns, despite the very clear fuck up in the beginning.
Well. It's a good thing John was the co-host and not somebody else on this one, or else we would have never heard the end of it.
Yeah, those are the 3 highlights for me. I mean, getting the photo, and I remember that with crystal clarity. I always will. But the experiences themselves of the songs, those are my 3.
John?
That's great.
We have 2 John F's on the show, by the way. I don't know, it makes it for kind of confusing.
My number 3, I'm going to say Sirens, having that be the intro song, setting the tone for the whole night, having the Steve Gleason intro just made it super special from the get-go. And I thought that really elevated the band throughout the whole night. My number 2, I'm gonna agree with the other John F. and say Rearview Mirror. Fantastic performance. You don't get a lot of Ed ad-libbing at the end, so I thought that was really cool how he kind of explained it and got the crowd on his side and took him on the ride there.
Yeah.
My number 1, I didn't mention this when we talked about the song, but this was so cool. Like I mentioned, there's the webcast version on YouTube, and they have like a little cam on each of the band members. Like there's like a mic cam, and like probably on the pedal board, like where it's right up close. Not a fisheye, but like almost so that you get like kind of an up close, intimate camera. And right after Alive, it cuts to Ed's camera, and he kind of collapses.
Yes.
On the stage, right?
Yeah.
And so you see kind of off in the background, like Stones start the Rocket and the Free World riff, and Eddie kind of gets this look like yeah, like here we go, and he like raises his arm up and starts snapping his fingers, and he kind of starts dancing a little bit.
Yeah.
And it was just one of those things where you're like, this guy has done this almost 1,000 times, and he's still in it for the music, and he's in it for the love, and he's in it. They could easily phone this kind of thing in, Alive, Rockin' the Free World, whatever.
It's bread and butter.
In that moment, like it made me love this band even more. Like just that moment where he just loves the music, and he's in it for the right reasons, and he was feeling it in that moment. So that's my number 1. Like, if go back and watch it, like watch the YouTube show. It's unbelievable. Every song is great. I loved going back and watching the show and listening to it. But that is my number 1 moment, just to see that look on his face and like just knowing that like he's still in it for the music and the love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very well said.
Wow. Yeah. Fantastic. I have a 4. I have a 4th that I didn't, an honorable mention. I didn't mention Inside Job in my top 3 when I wrote it down, so I'm going to, for the sanctity of the top 3, I will keep them intact and say that Inside Job is an honorable mention due to its meaning to Steve Gleason and what it would become 3 years later in Wrigley, and how much meaning that version had. But number 3 to me, and I think we all kind of were on the same page with things here. Number 3 to me was Present Tense, and how it kicked into an extra gear, and you felt the passion from it. You felt Ed was trying to get to another level, and he was feeling something on stage. And when he said that in that part, like you could just feel the whole band feeling his vibe. It was something really special in that. Number 2, Sirens, because Sirens has only been opened with twice.
Wow.
So this is one of 2 times. The song has been played close to 70 times. So it's probably most of, since Lightning Bolt came out, probably, I would say, there's been a little over 100 shows, so 70-ish% of the time. But this was the kickoff to the night. This told everybody this was what kind of night it was going to be. It wasn't going to be a Pearl Jam show that was going to. It was going to make you. It was going to make you emotional a little bit. It wasn't going to knock your socks off. It wasn't going to be a lot of sing-alongs. It was going to be a little bit different. And I really appreciated the melody with everybody singing in. All 5 of them singing in at the end there was fantastic. And number 1, you guys both said it, Rearview Mirror was just fantastic in this one. Ed calling out all the assholes and say run away from all the assholes, and I feel like this song has some extra deep seated meaning to him, and sometimes he can kick in and kind of reignite that passion in the same way that he does a lot with Alive. Sometimes where he hears the lyrics and he is back into where he was when he was writing the song, and it kind of felt like he was channeling a little bit of that at that point. So those are my top 3 there. Now since we said all that, let's rate the show. What do you got? Out of 10.
All right, I would give it a solid 9.
I'm in on that. That's John.
That's a little low for me. I'm gonna say 9.5. This show is fucking amazing.
Wow.
This is classic Pearl Jam. Like, as far as I'm concerned, like, I love the set list. Nothing bad to say about it. I was going through the first time I listened to it, making notes like, great, song's great, performance is great, love it. I thought it was amazing. 9.5.
Awesome.
I feel horrible now.
Oh shit!
Because I'm not extreme lower, but I'm a little lower. I'm the next number down. But for me, it had the emotional feeling, but I think it was one of those things where if I was there, I would have felt a stronger connection to it. And it's not like I don't have that strong connection by listening to the bootleg, but I feel like there needs to be some in between where, I'll give shows that I've been to at times a 9 or a 9.5, where if I wouldn't have been to that show, it would have been an 8. And that's where I stand right now, where this was really good and a really fun listen and emotional listen. This was, I think, for people that were there and for people that experienced it, I think it's an absolute 9 or 10 for them. But listening to it back on the bootleg, I think it's a really good 8. It's like a high 8. Does that make sense? A high 8.
We'll get back together next week, and I'll give you a chance. Go watch it again. When we come back next week, I'll give you a chance to.
I got Buffalo to listen to.
I can accept the asterisk on that. I mean, being at the show is a different experience. As far as I'm concerned, a perfect 10 show is something like, Fox Theater 94.
Yeah.
And that's, there's new songs, there's crazy tags that are, extended. There's, all kinds of shit that's
dedication
off the wall
to Kurt
bonkers.
Cobain.
And this was maybe a little more circumstantial. But I hear you.
If this had been in Atlanta, it would have been a 10.
Oh, fuck off.
Fair enough.
All right. Before we part ways with you, anything else you want to promote? Again, Johnny Firecloud with the Antiquiet Podcast. You have to go and listen to the first part of his life as his Pearl Jam fandom. What exactly do you call it so people can see it? What is the actual episode name for that?
It's episode,
just life as a Pearl Jam fan?
Yeah, it's episode 47, and I think it's called The Fan Life.
Yeah, Pearl Jam Fan Life, 91 to 2003. And you've mentioned you've done a couple episodes about Pearl Jam, so definitely people go back and listen to those too.
After my experience in Seattle, having seen them last August, it was August 10th, I recorded kind of a review of that. That's episode 36. It was in the morning when I woke up, and I was still just under the spell of that, and it really kind of hit home. And I did another one that was can't really place it right now, but it was just basically the reason why I feel such a deep connection to music and the passion that I have for it, that translated into a career, into music journalism, over the years. And there's quite a bit to dig into if you're a rock fan, if you're a Pearl Jam fan, both on Antiquiet.com and the podcast. But by Thanksgiving or so, I'm going to have part 2 up, and that'll be the adult years, I guess you could say.
Dad Johnny.
Dad Johnny, yeah. Great way to sell it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a great show, and again, we highly recommend going and checking it out. Thanks so much for coming on the show, man.
Thank you, man. I really
Johnny.
appreciate it. It was an honor, and had a blast, you guys. Thanks, you guys.
Yeah, we'll have to have you
too.
back at some point.
Would love to. Absolutely.
After you got it's 59 more shows that we got to do. Thanks again, and remember just hit up the Antiquiet Podcast, and the part 1 of Fan Life as a Pearl Jam fan is out. Part 2, we will tell you the minute that it's out, because it's going to be really fucking good. Yeah. You're going to want to listen to it, and you're all going to be able to relate to it. So once again, Johnny, thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for the stories. Thank you for everything that we talked about today. We had a blast.
Awesome. You guys are amazing. Thanks again so much. And take care. Good luck to you.
You got it.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Till next time.
All right, John. So it's October. And October is a really good Pearl Jam month. And like we just talked about, this show that we talked about was November 1st, so it's essentially October. But the Lightning Bolt tour in 2013 is really significant. And you love when I mention this. I just wanted to ask you, do you know how many times I saw Pearl Jam on the Lightning Bolt tour?
I don't know, Randy. How many times did you see Pearl Jam on the Lightning Bolt tour?
4 in 2 weeks, John, and it was amazing, and I'm going to talk about it next week.
Well, we've already talked about the one that I went to, so I guess it's only fair.
Well, technically, we talked about the one I went to last year around this time, too, so that's the Brooklyn show. But yes, next week, next episode, a little preview for you guys. I think I mentioned it at some point before. Buffalo.
Yeah, we're staying in 2013. We're going to hang out there for a little while.
Yeah, we're going to hang out.
The good old days.
Yeah, we're... the good old days. Oh, yeah, back when they were touring, right?
Right.
Yeah, we're going to... The whole month of October, we're not, like, drifting too far into deep territory, but November, we're going to... we're going to drift a little bit. We're going to make sure we get a 90s and go a little bit deeper.
Would you say we might be drifting away?
Drifting away.
Okay.
No.
Okay, that's enough. That's enough.
Well, we said we were going to sing.
We did.
Yeah.
That wasn't singing though. That was something else.
That was 999. There's doing, and there's 999, and we did both on this show. So, A+.
We've got a lot of cool things planned for later this year, and then going into next year. It's gonna be a good be great going forward. I'm really excited.
You guys are gonna enjoy it. If you've already been enjoying it, you're gonna enjoy it more. If you haven't been enjoying it, stop listening. What are you doing with yourselves? This has already been a long enough episode as it is.
Go listen to the Antiquiet podcast. It's so
yes,
good.
please do that. And next week we'll be back with Buffalo 2013, which means more to me than it does the average fan, and that's kind of like, what we were saying before about, how I would give something a 9 rating if I was there. That's kind of like this next show.
I haven't listened to it yet, but I'm going to tell you I'm going to give it a 4.
Oh, fuck off. You would never give a Pearl Jam show a 4. What are you, Matt?
Hey, I haven't heard Buffalo. We'll see.
Buffalo is something good. Buffalo is good. It's beginning of that tour. Obviously, Pittsburgh was the first one from, starting off, and Buffalo was the second one. We'll talk about, how I decided, basically 2 days before that I was going to this and driving 6 hours up to Buffalo. We'll talk about all that shit. So get ready for all that.
Going back the ones that we've done, in kind of hindsight, this 2013 tour was actually kind of great.
I think it was fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't find a better sequence of 4 shows that I've been to, John.
Fucking asshole.
I had to. You set it up. But I knocked it down like a ton.
No, but we haven't done Charlottesville. That was great.
Yeah.
There's a lot to get into.
All right, John. Say goodnight. Say your stuff. What's your sign off? Say it.
Hello, Matt. Come down, Matt.
And although we may be parting ways, I miss you already. I miss you always. Thank you, everybody, for listening in. And go listen to Antiquiet right now. Johnny Firecloud does some fucking awesome stuff. And part 2, when it comes out, you will be the first to know, because we'll be the first to tell you. So, again, go listen to that. And we will see you next week with Buffalo 2013.
Bye.
Everyone who has a heartbeat will face adversity, but when you experience those moments, like the message in this song, Please remember this. How we choose to feel is how we are. And personally, I feel fucking awesome.
Comes from within your heart.